various other spheres. I know I have a lot of information about him, but I am unable to express in words because we had such a extensive interactions with the professor, and he has a lot of achievements in the areas of microfinance, in the areas of financial markets, and he's I can proudly say he's a truly global professor, having traveled a lot of countries, worked in Australia, and presently in Netherlands, University of Twente, and also is a very celebrated professor, I can say. And I'm very happy that he has kindly consented to discuss with us, to interact with us, and being a pioneer in many fields. I can say he has he has seen, he has envisioned, he has foresight of analytics 5 years, 6 years back. So he told me when attending one conference, Dhananjay, analytics is the future. You try to incorporate into your curriculum. And I am happy to say that kept on in my mind. But because we are a university affiliated institution, but now we have become autonomous. We have the freedom we had introduced in the curriculum this year, that is MBA R21 regulations. In fact, I had an idea of inviting professor for our board of studies, but I don't have that courage, being a small institution in tier 2, tier 3 towns. I'm afraid to invite, have him as one of the members. Maybe in future, I will have that courage to induct him as a advisor to our board of studies. And this I can go on and on. Being a teacher, 50 minutes is a minimum time for me if I go to the podium, but I don't dare in this August gathering. A lot of people have joined, sir, to listen to your discussion and dialogue on cryptocurrencies, blockchain, and digital finance. And I can say that you are the pioneer in this fintech. I can say he's a person who I can call him as professor of fintech. That suits him very aptly. And there's a lot of things available on social media about Professor Vijay Bhaskar sir. And he's a multifaceted person. You can say he's a painter, singer, and and he can interact with farmers, and he can interact with the RBI officials on the same level. And we can emotionally connect with all sorts of all age groups also, I can say, because I have seen him personally in many spheres, and his NGO work, his socially responsible projects works, many things you can find, you can read more, and that way enriches our understanding of finance, markets, and the economy, and all these things. I'm very happy to host you today, sir. It is
thank you.
It is a blessing for us today to interact with you, to understand your mind, and the way he interacts with the audience, he connects with the audience. I've seen in very good conference we have conducted, emerging trends in business, economics, and commerce, way back in 2018. It's a very wonderful conference, and even still, after 4 years, also the participants remember the way, the intensity with which you interacted with the audience, sir. Without much further ado, I hand over this platform.
Thank you
To Professor Vijay Bhaskar Marshit, sir.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Narayana Institutions and Professor Dhananjay Kangineni, the current Dean of the MBA Business School of Narayana Institutions. My pleasure to be here and to share what I know about blockchain and cryptocurrencies. I'm hoping that it would be of use for at least some of you. And I must say that this is of great importance in the coming years. So I work on blockchain. I have done some research, and also I teach blockchain courses. At the same time, I mentor and I'm a founder of a couple of startups in blockchain area. So I'm going to share my screen. And, I'll take it from there. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I don't know how I can push this button here to the bottom, or is it possible to take this out from here? Maybe I can't. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so I think we have around 15 minutes together. I'll spend introducing to blockchain, assuming that the audience here have relatively less information about blockchain. I think that's the assumption on which I'm starting my discussion. So I work as a professor at the University of Twente in Netherlands, and also affiliated to the University of Hyderabad as a professor there. Okay, before I really start with blockchain, this slide is trying to share more about innovations that have happened over time in the last, say, 200 years of human history. So the innovations and the gaps behind the innovations. So, for example, knowledge gap was a huge gap. If you look at before 16th century, there was a huge gap in knowledge. For example, let's assume that if you look at the European institutions and also in India too, I think. So one classic example I can give is so how many people were able to read, say, for example, something like Bible. Before 16th century, there were very few people who were able to read a Bible, and the Bible was there in the hands of only very few highly elite people in the society. And what's the content of the Bible? This was not available to ordinary people, and they have to just listen to people who have access to the Bible. So whatever they used to tell in the Bible, so they have to just believe based on what has been interpreted by the people who have access to the Bible. So this might lead to a lot of misconceptions, and that has led to a lot of wars, a lot of violence, etc. And all this was due to knowledge gap. So there was a gap in the way knowledge has been shared between people in the societies. And with the advent of printing press in the 16th century by Gutenberg in Germany, changed the face of how knowledge is transferred. So knowledge used to be available only in a church in those days. Now you can print a Bible and the Bible is available in a public library. So you don't have to go and meet as elite person to understand what is the content of the Bible. You can as well go to a library and read Bible. So this was a big change in human history on how information is shared or knowledge is shared. And the whole sharing process or disruption was driven by invention of printing press. So that's one of the greatest innovations in the history of mankind. Now, after that, we had another innovation in terms of how we, the mobility, how we move from place to place. For example, I'm sitting here in Netherlands, so it doesn't take time for me to come here. It takes a few hours to reach Netherlands from India. And my wife and my daughter wants to join me in Netherlands, so they can just book a flight and come here. So mobility, if you take even 150 years ago, was not possible the way we are mobile now. So again, one innovation that led to this gap in terms of power here is how you can move around. This was done due to the invention of engine. Engine led to a lot of things to move. So not only machines, people. were able to move. That's one of the greatest innovations. And the third innovation is about distance gap. For example, again, I take the Netherlands example. I'm sitting in Netherlands right now. The time is afternoon here. You're all sitting the evening in India, and we don't have any distance gap. I'm talking, and you're able to see it live. So this was able to be filled by something called as internet. So this gap was able to be filled by internet, and I think that is one of the major disruptors in the human history. In the last 30 years, we know how we have changed. Okay, someone is raising hand there. Is someone raising hand? Hello?
No, sir, I think please carry on, sir. I think by mistake there.
Okay. So, so the distance gap has been filled by internet, and that has led to a huge disruption in terms of how we communicate with each other. So I must say that the knowledge gap, power gap, and distance gap have been one of the greatest gaps we have faced over the last, say, 30,000 years of human history. And these gaps have been filled only in the last 300 or 400 years. So the next gap that is being filled right now is something called as trust gap. So we have able to complete the knowledge gap or fill the knowledge gap, power gap. See, I can read anything I want. I can just browse the internet, whatever knowledge I want to acquire, I can acquire. Wherever I want to go, I can go. Whatever is the distance, I can communicate. But can I trust the other person? I think that's a bigger gap. That's not an easy gap to be filled. So what we face right now by overcoming all these gaps is we are facing a trust gap, especially if the distance is quite large. For example, I'm in Netherlands and you're all in India. Let's assume you don't know me. How do I identify that I'm trustworthy to, or someone who is good enough to discuss on blockchain? How can you trust me? Right? So it's not easy. So trust and distance have a negative correlation. So if I'm your neighbor, you can trust me more than sitting in Netherlands. So you're trusting me right now because your professor Dhananjay knows me relatively closely. Hence, I think he trusts me, and he called me for this discussion here today. But on the other hand, how would I trust Dhananjay on the other hand? So why would I trust Dhananjay to come and give a talk, spend my afternoon, on a weekend and come and give a talk here? So this gap is something very, very difficult to fill, especially if you are filling a distance gap. The natural gap that creates by filling the distance gap is the trust gap. Now, what we are doing right now with blockchain is we're trying to address that gap. So that's why blockchain is considered as one of the largest disruptors in the modern history, right? So if we can overcome trust gap and also distance gap, it means that we can do commerce anywhere, from anywhere to anywhere in the world. So is it possible? How blockchain can solve the problem? My discussion is mainly addressing these two things. So how can we, we know that we have overcome the distance gap, but how can we overcome the trust gap? Because distance gap directly leads to trust gap, right? So how can we overcome, and how blockchain can help us? That's the discussion I'm going to have. So the person here on the screen, she is the IBM CEO. So this is her statement. She says that what the internet did for communications, blockchain will do for trusted transactions. So that's a big statement. So she's trying to compare that whatever disruption that happened due to blockchain or internet, a similar thing would happen through blockchain. Whereas internet has covered the communication gap. Now, blockchain would cover transactions gap, especially between people who are not trustworthy. So, in other words, you can carry out a trustless transaction without any problem by having a blockchain. So if you can do that, then I think commerce would multiply, right? So the global trade would multiply. So a lot of things would change. So hence, blockchain is considered as one of the largest disruptor in the current economic or innovations or the current phase of the world. So blockchain right now, we are in version 4 of blockchain. We started with blockchain mainly to solve a currency problem. So then it evolved into a transaction solving problem through smart contracts. Then how can we develop applications around blockchain? That's version 3. Now we have industry level blockchains where we have enterprise level versions of blockchain that we are currently in version 4 of blockchain. We'll get to what exactly is blockchain. To understand blockchain, the most important thing you have to understand is the concept of cost of verification. What is the cost of verification is something we have to be clear with. I have 2 pictures here. One is I think that there is a man and a woman so in front of a lot of fruits and vegetables. And there is another one where someone is holding a mobile phone with a Uber bag as a backpack. Right. So in the first case, the man and woman here, they are neighbors. And the man is a farmer. And the woman in the picture is a neighbor. So she's coming to shop for vegetables and fruits to a neighbor shop who happens to be a farmer and who grows all those vegetables and fruits. Now, what is the cost of verification there? Right. So in other words, when I say cost of verification, does she need to really verify that this person is going to supply these goods if I pay cash? What do you think? Is there any cost of verification for her? Yeah. Do you see any cost of verification in that picture?
Not at all.
Yeah, so there is no cost of verification because they're neighbors. And she knows, she's been seeing this person growing all these vegetables and fruits. And I think, they can come and she can believe that person and then hence they can trade. Whereas you look at the right picture, you have an Uber so employee, so who is sitting there and then trying to take an order, for example, right? Or delivering an order. And you're sitting at home. Now, what is the cost of verification for you? Or what is the cost of verification for, say, the restaurant which is supplying food to you? Is there a cost of verification for you both? Do you bear a cost of verification? Yeah, so someone is saying that yes, there is a cost of being online. What is the cost of verification there? Can you tell me an example of cost of verification in the Uber picture?
It is through OTP only, so there will be no cost.
Yeah, so how does the restaurant believe that this person who made the order will pay? How can they trust the buyer?
That I don't know, sir.
No, you all know. You know. Sorry, you're all doing this on a daily basis. Sorry.
Sir, shall I answer, sir?
Yeah, please.
Sir, the buyer will send the message to the guy who to the delivery guy who was deliver him the food. So through that he can see the cost.
No. How the seller is ensured that the buyer will pay the seller?
It is, I think it is through the platform that the goods are provided. Like
Yeah.
Uber.
So who does anyone provide the service between the two parties
Yes, sir.
on a platform? Yeah. Who is the
Yeah.
person? Who provides
In
the
this case,
service?
Uber Eats. In this case, Uber Eats. It is providing the services, and
Uber
for
Eats.
that they are charging the commissions.
Yeah. So there are many people who provide a valet service. Do you know the valet service? Like you have, for example, Paytm. Yeah, Paytm is a valet service. And Paytm valet service is meant to ensure that the buyer has enough cash in the wallet so that the seller can send the goods to the buyer. Given that Paytm assures that the buyer has money in the wallet. So, now, is there a cost of verification there? Yeah. What do you think? Is there a cost of verification? Yeah, everyone is saying yes, because they have to pay some kind of a commission to the Paytm. So we are paying commission to the Paytm for providing the cost of verification. Now let's assume that there are many buyers and there are many sellers in the market. Would the cost of verification provider become more powerful in that network? Because the cost of verification provider will have information about the buyers and sellers of the whole market. So because they become the market indirectly, because they have to provide cost of verification for the buyers and cost of verification service for the sellers. Right. So as the network increases, you see that buyers and sellers, they don't know each other, but they have to trust each other. So someone is providing this service called as cost of verification, right? Ensuring that they can transact in a trustless way, right? So without any problem. So it's a trustless way of, transacting without having any problem of being trustless, right? So now, but for doing this service, someone is getting paid. Someone is charging that cost of verification as a service. Like you have Paytms, all the fintech companies, right? Right now they're doing that. And in a traditional way, who does that job is a bank. You look at a bank. What is the role of a bank? So a bank provides a market for lenders and borrowers, right? So lenders would deposit the money as a fixed deposit, and the borrowers would, borrow from the bank whatever the lenders have deposited. And in the process, bank provides this cost of verification for both, because lender can directly lend it to the borrower, but I think it is too risky for the lender, and the lender may not know that borrower, right? So they have to trust someone in between, right? And someone in between here happens to be the bank. And the role of a bank is to provide this cost of verification service. And for that, the charge is spread, right? So the difference in the lending rate and borrowing rate is bank's income. Now, what happens in the process is, as there are too many people who are transacting as lenders and borrowers, banks become very powerful in the process as a middleman. So in other words, the people who are engaging in transactions become weaker compared to the middlemen in the whole ecosystem, right? So middlemen are much more powerful in the ecosystem, right? So that happened in many cases where banks, having got a lot of information about the lenders and borrowers, try to provide a lot of other services to them. And for every other thing, they have to depend on them, and every transaction has to go through them. So when all these things happen, naturally the intermediaries or the middlemen become very powerful. And when they become very powerful, they can as well do a lot of activities that can benefit them more. And that's what they have done during the early 2000s until 2007 and 8. Then came the financial crisis. The financial crisis came purely because we trusted a lot on the middlemen, because we trusted someone who was providing this cost of verification service for us, right? So, and they were dealing with all that our money. The middleman was too powerful, and they took a lot of aggressive decisions, and that led to the financial crisis. So when this financial crisis came, a lot of people lost money, and the computer scientists across the world were thinking how to solve this kind of a problem where middleman power can be reduced. Then a group of computer scientists, we don't know exactly who the group is until now, they thought they have to invent a mechanism, a kind of an algorithm mechanism or an architecture in such a way that people can engage in transactions in a trustless way, yet without having any middleman. So this is the origin of blockchain. So blockchain came at that point, right? So blockchain became quite powerful at that point, right? So how to really solve this problem? How can we create an architecture in such a way that people who don't know each other, yet they can transact without having a middleman or a provider of cost of verification service? Then the first set of scientists came out with something called as a Bitcoin. And it's like a currency on its own that can be used to carry out transactions in an ecosystem in such a way that no one has to know or trust the other person. And they involve a third party, and they incentivize the third party to validate whatever information is being posted on this platform. And they're incentivized by paying this Bitcoin. So it's like a currency that has got value within the network. This way of incentivizing the people will encourage more people to come and participate on the blockchain platform. The more the people come and participate at the platform, the more it becomes valuable. And the more it becomes valuable, the more would be the value of the Bitcoin, right? So with this idea, they started the first digital currency called as Bitcoin, and the first blockchain platform, right? So in other words, blockchain is a way you can engage in a transaction without having a middleman, or conduct a trustless transaction without any cost of verification, right? So that's the origin of blockchain. One second. Yeah. Now, sorry. Now, before we get into the blockchain or cryptocurrencies, we have to understand few concepts. One concept is something called as traceability, and the other concept is called as transparency. These are not exactly the same. So traceability is having information from the source to the final stage. So you should have information at different points of time. For example, let's assume, for example, you purchase milk in a supermarket. Let's assume the milk bottle has got a QR code, and when you scan the QR code, let's assume you get information through a mobile app, information about the farmer who has produced the milk, which cow has been used to source the milk, and what ingredients the cow has intakes or eats to produce the milk, and what is the composition of fat in the milk, and who processed the milk, or making it as a toned milk, and so how it has come to the shop for you to purchase. So in other words, you have a sequence of events at different timestamps. Having information of all these events is called as traceability. In other words, you have information about what, where, when, right? So this is traceability. It's important to know this concept because in blockchain, one of the major concepts we come across is traceability. The other concept you have to understand is transparency. So along with traceability, the other important concept in blockchain is transparency. So when we talk about transparency, we are trying to understand how information is shared, right? So if you think of a blockchain is unique mainly in terms of how information is shared between parties who transact. So let's assume there are 2 or 3 players. One is a bank. The other one, let's assume a borrower, say the borrower happens to be someone like a farmer. And there is a company that supplies inputs, like fertilizer company. So you have a fertilizer company, farmer, and a bank. Now, so a farmer could be a cooperative of farmers. So it's an entity on its own, a legal entity on its own. Now, let's assume they're engaging in a transaction in such a way that the farmer wants a loan from the bank for supplying or buying inputs or fertilizers. Now, the fertilizer company maintains a set of transactions in their ledger about this transaction. Let's assume the bank gives a loan to the fertilizer company, and the fertilizer company delivers the fertilizers to the farmers. So this transaction they have to record because it's a credit transaction. So they have to record this information of value. Now, bank, given that it's a loan, they also have to record the same information in their books. So they record that so-and-so borrower has borrowed the funds, and these funds have been utilized for purchasing fertilizers. It's a credit transaction. So they also record in their ledger. Now, the third party here is a farmer. Farmer also has to record this information in their own ledger, right? So saying that I owe this much money to the bank because I purchased fertilizer from this X company. So this is how information is normally conventionally maintained between 3 entities. In other words, 3 of them maintain separate ledgers on their own. But when we talk about transparency in a blockchain context, what we mean here is that instead of having 3 separate ledgers, all the 3 parties will have only one ledger, which is visible to all 3 parties. So this kind of a ledger mechanism is called as distributed ledgers. In other words, the ledger is distributed across all entities, and that ledger is visible to all, and everyone records information on the same ledger. In other words, information, whatever is recorded, is visible to all parties. In other words, it's transparent. So please note that traceability is all about having information about what, where, and when the transactions happen. Whereas transparency is all about how the transaction level information is shared across parties. Okay, this is important for you to keep an idea. Now, how blockchain has evolved over time, right? So we discussed about the history of blockchain. There is a pseudonym of the person who invented the Bitcoin and the first blockchain platform. The person is Satoshi Nakamoto. It's not a real person, that's a pseudonym of a group of scientists. It came out during the financial crisis because of cost of verification problem, as we discussed. Then eventually, we have more and more developments in blockchain. As I told you, right now we're in version 4 of blockchain. So over time, there have been a lot of advancements in blockchain. I'll talk more about them in a minute. So as a logical evolution process, you're trying to compare blockchain with internet. So internet first evolved as a text messages. Then we were able to share information in terms of images. Then we were able to share in terms of programs, and later we are able to share information in terms of videos. Likewise, blockchain started as a currency like Bitcoins. Then the next stage of evolution was we were able to have contracts between parties on a blockchain platform. Then now more blockchains, more patents, now assets can also be transacted on blockchains. That's where we are right now. So again, in terms of the features of the blockchain, as given here, so blockchain avoids the problem of double spending. right? So because there is someone who validates whether the transaction has been between A and B or A and C, right? So given that someone validates, you won't have any double spending problem, right? So even though you can't trust the other person, it doesn't matter. And there is a centralized control in the sense, in a normal platform, whereas in the case of a blockchain, it is decentralized. And there is trust and transparency because it's decentralized, and no transaction fees paid to any middleman in a blockchain network. Blockchain is growing in terms of size. So it started as a simple idea. Now all big companies are involving blockchain. Like for example, IBM, Microsoft, they have their own blockchain platforms right now. And it's becoming a multi-billion-dollar industry right now. So it's growing, it's becoming big and big as we discuss. Let's try to understand what exactly is a blockchain, what's inside of a blockchain. Right. So if you look at a blockchain, 1 second, this coming in between. Okay. So this is a typical block. A block is nothing but a list of transactions that are entered onto the platform, and it's always connected with a hashtag with the previous block, right? So you see the block hash. So block hash is like a code. You see here block 15, and there is a hashtag here. And you have block 16, there is a hashtag here. So you see that they're all connected. In other words, block 15's hashtag is part of block 16. And block 16's hashtag is part of block 17. Right? So information of block 16 is always connected with the information of the next block created in the blockchain. So the reason why it is a chain is because these are all interconnected through hashtags. Right? And each block contains a list of transactions. And these transactions are posted on the blockchain, and there are people who have to validate whether these transactions are true or not. So there are many protocols to validate. We'll discuss that later. But given that you have this hashtagging process and a chain process, if someone has to manipulate any of these transactions, it's almost impossible, because they have to change in this block, and they have to change the information in this block. They have to change in information in millions of blocks that are already created, right? So hence, the information that is available to people on blockchain is called as immutable information. When we say immutable, it means that it's not easy to change. Once it's recorded, it is almost incorruptible. Given that it has got this strength of immutability, people can trust it. So if some recorded information is available on blockchain, given that no one can manipulate or tamper that, right? So people can believe the information that is there on the blockchain. And that can be validated at any point of time, because you can follow the whole traceability on the blockchain, right? So that's a big thing. The second thing is, given that all these blocks are distributed on a ledger that is shared across parties, it is always audit ready. What do we mean by audit ready? I'll take you back to the same example I gave before. Let's assume there is an input supplier company, which is a fertilizer company, and there is a bank, and there is a borrower who happens to be a farmer. Now, if all three parties are maintaining separate records, right? So there is always audit problem, reconciliation problem. So information needs to be reconciled. So in other words, bank has to make sure that their information is same as the information recorded in other ledgers on that transaction, right? So reconciliation is a very time-consuming, costly process in business, and that leads to a lot of problems in terms of not gaining trust between parties. Whereas if you have a distributed ledger, like in blockchain, you don't have to reconcile anything because it's always audit ready, right? So this is a shared, replicated, permissioned ledger, right? So with consensus, in other words, someone provides a consensus mechanism, with provenance. Provenance means the origin, location, details, timestamps, etc. Immutable means no one can change. Finality means there is only single source of truth. Once it is there, it's final, right? So that's what a blockchain is all about. Okay. Yeah. So there are four pillars to blockchain. One is, as we discussed, it's a distributed ledger. And the second one is immutability that's coming due to cryptography. The third one is consensus. This is a validation process. The fourth one is the smart contracts. We'll discuss more about smart contracts. In other words, how you can transact much more efficiently and quickly on a blockchain by having contracts which are nothing but pre-defined logical algorithms on a blockchain platform. So this is an example of a distributed ledger. So central ledger is there is only one central database that records all the data, and so all different departments are connected to that central database. And central database is problematic because it's if it is centralized, only one person will have full authority on the database. But if you're transacting across many parties in a trustless way, you can't have a centralized database. It has to be decentralized. Like for example, here, so there are participant A, participant B, bank, auditor, regulator, and insurer. All of them are maintaining their own ledgers, which is very inefficient, expensive, and vulnerable. Whereas if you have a blockchain, all of them will have only one ledger, and the same information is replicated in each entity or each node in blockchain language. So the second one is cryptography, which gives the immutability in the blockchain. So what is cryptography in terms of blockchain? Here is that there is a concept called as asymmetric encryption. So asymmetric encryption is providing two different keys or codes. One is called as a public key, and the other one is called as a secret or a private key. And so all information that is recorded is encrypted. And with encryption, so it is available for anyone using a public key, but only one person who owns the who is part of that particular transaction. Let's assume there is a particular buyer and particular seller. So the seller provides a public and private key on the blockchain, but private key is available only to the buyer. But whoever is trying to validate this, all of them will have access to the public key, right? So the only one who can decrypt this is the buyer. So that's called as asymmetric encryption process, which is part of the blockchain. So hashing, as we discussed, hashing will have a lot of information. I don't want to take this technical, but hashing is very important because hashing is like a unique code that represents each block in the blockchain. And the third pillar is smart contracts. So smart contract is nothing but a pre-written logic that gets executed on the blockchain as long as things are validated or events are triggered on the blockchain. Like for example, let's assume that there is a blockchain between a rental agent or an owner and the renting tenant. So let's assume both of them have working on a blockchain, or they're transacting on a blockchain. Now you can set up a smart contract saying that as long as the KYC is done, the owner of the house can give permission to the tenant to rent the house. And as long as every month is done, I think the amount of money, again, let's assume that every month one of the rental condition is such that I think there is a lot of noise coming here. Can you please mute your phones? Thank you. Can you please mute your phones?
Sumalata madam, please mute all the other participants.
Thanks. Okay. So I was giving this example of rental transaction between an owner and tenant without having a middleman who happens to be the rental agent. So how can they transact without a rental agent as a middleman? So they can set up a smart contract in such a way that the KYC, once these conditions are fulfilled, the rental agreement is signed. And let's assume as part of the contract conditions, every month there are some deductibles. So for example, some expenses that needs to be taken out, say there is a repair that goes on. And as long as the tenant provides the bills of the repair, automatically the amount is adjusted, and only the liable portion is sent from the bank account of the tenant to the owner of the house, right? So this is an example of pre-written logic. Like for example, in Europe, there are a lot of insurance companies that use blockchain, where an insurance company, you can have travel insurance. In a normal travel insurance, what happens is you sign a contract with the insurance company, and much before you actually take the travel. And your contract ends after a specified period. Say it could be a contract for a month or 6 months or a year. Whereas now with smart contracts, what happens is I can enter a contract just before boarding the flight. The insurance company will get to know that I'm boarding the flight or not based on my GPS coordinates. So once I sit in the flight, then I execute the contract that I need travel insurance. And once I come out of the flight, based on the GPS coordinates, the insurance company knows that this person has come out of the flight now. Then automatically the contract gets closed. So your travel insurance only is for that particular journey, but from the day, from the time you onboarded the flight until came out of the airplane, right? So now, if you have a smart contract like that, it's quite straightforward and easy and very cheap for someone who is taking the flight. And you can as well set up a smart contract in such a way that, let's assume, unfortunately, there is an event or an accident. How much need to be claimed on all these things can be part of a pre-written logic. And you don't even have to go for a claiming process. As long as the pre-written logic is met, whatever claim will be credited to your bank account. So these are examples of smart contracts. The first important pillar of blockchain is consensus. Consensus is a validation process where we say that this transaction is a true transaction on the block. So someone provides validation process, but there are many types of consensus mechanisms in blockchain. So like, for example, the Bitcoin uses something called as proof of work. Ethereum, right, another cryptocurrency, they use a consensus mechanism, which is called as a proof of stake. Like, for example, Hyperledger uses a consensus mechanism called as a proof of authority. What are these consensus mechanisms? Like, for example, I'll compare 3 consensus mechanisms. Okay, proof of work, you can think like this. So I'm giving an analogy here of a treasure chest with a number lock. The consensus mechanism in the case of proof of work is whoever cracks the code first builds the block, and they get the cryptocurrency. right? And this is proof of work is the way Bitcoin does. Whereas proof of stake is a different way of arriving at consensus. Again, there is a treasure chest with a number lock. Now, consensus happens purely based on whoever puts the highest stake will have the permission to open or put the next block. Proof of authority, again, treasure chest with a number lock. So in this case, whoever is assigned with an authority, they have the right to put the block. Right. So there are different types of consensus mechanisms based on the type of blockchain platform that you want to develop. Right. So, and also based on this, you have the degree of difficulty. For example, Bitcoin is the most difficult consensus mechanisms and also one of the costliest consensus mechanisms, because whoever first cracks the code, and every time in the evolution of Bitcoin, the code becomes complex and complex. That's how it has been built. That's why I think, these miners have to use so many computers to come out with cracking the code and putting the block and getting the Bitcoins, right? So whereas the proof of authority is relatively straightforward for business purposes, because in the case of Bitcoins, it's a public blockchain. In other words, anyone can participate. Whereas Hyperledger Fabric-based blockchains, they are permission blockchains with known parties. Let's assume there is a blockchain between a bank, a fertilizer company, and a borrower. So these three parties are only the nodes or the parties involved in the blockchain platform. So in that case, if they know each other, you don't need proof of work. You don't need that kind of difficult consensus algorithm. You can have simple proof of authority. You can say that bank money is being spent on by these two people. Hence, based on the authority, banks should have the power to build the blocks, right? So in that case, you don't need stronger consensus algorithms. Second. Yeah, so now we enter into this concept called as permission versus permission versus public blockchains. I was talking about this. Bitcoin is an example of a permission blockchain. Hyperledger is an example of, Bitcoin is an example of permissionless blockchain. Hyperledger is an example of a permission blockchain. So permission blockchain is, it's a private blockchain, whereas a permissionless blockchain is a public blockchain. So anyone can get into Bitcoin platform or Ethereum platform. These are public blockchains. They're permissionless. Whereas if you're building a blockchain for a set of parties or to transact, then not anyone can enter. Only those parties can enter. And that's called as a permission blockchain. Then what do you really need blockchain or not? This is like a logic diagram. So if you have to store information about a transaction state, so like any accounting transaction of value, then it's a good idea to have a blockchain, especially if there are many parties involved in that transaction. Most probably they don't know each other, right? So these parties, parties can be trusted and maybe cannot be trusted. If they cannot be trusted, then you should go have a public blockchain. If they can be trusted, should have a private blockchain. So the common blockchain platforms that you come across, the first one is Bitcoin. It's like the flagship of a digital currency. It's a peer-to-peer transaction with no middleman. And it's a public blockchain worldwide. No one really owns it and no one controls it. So it is of great value right now. But the downside of a Bitcoin is no smart contracts can be written on Bitcoin. So you can't use Bitcoins for business purposes. So in some nations, it is not allowed. Accessibility is a problem. In acceptability of the currency is also a problem. Now, I think in China, for example, they have banned digital currencies now. So recovery of your lost private key is almost impossible in a Bitcoin. So it's very important that you store that key quite safe. That's Bitcoin. The second one that came in the Bitcoin came in 2008, whereas Ethereum, the second one came in 2015. It's again a public blockchain, but this is the first blockchain platform where you can write a smart contract. In other words, you can use this for business. And the consensus algorithm is not proof of work, it is proof of stake here. So there are many Ethereum-based platforms. One big platform by Microsoft, a partnership is Consensus. Still, it is a public blockchain. It's not suitable in many cases. Scalability is a big problem because consensus mechanism using proof of stake is not easy. It takes a lot of time to build a block. Let's assume you're dealing with millions of transactions every minute. You can't use Ethereum. It's very expensive and it's very time-consuming, inefficient, right? So again, if you lose a key, then again, getting back is very difficult because it's a public blockchain. Hyperledger Fabric is the first enterprise grade blockchain platform for business purposes. They use proof of authority as the consensus mechanisms, and it's decentralized ledger. IBM is one of the major promoters of Hyperledger Fabric, and you can write smart contracts in this. So the development cycle is still long, and I think one of the major problems is the language used in Hyperledger is quite different from the language used in Ethereum. In Ethereum, use Solidity as the language, whereas in the case of Hyperledger, use Go as one of the major languages. And we don't have many skilled people in this area right now. Corda is another blockchain platform. So these are all not only blockchain platforms, these are all digital currencies too. They're all traded in the cryptocurrency markets. So Corda is a consortium of many banks. So 60 world biggest financial institutions joined to form Corda. And they use Kotlin languages and Java sometimes as a language to write contracts. So it's a major competitor to IBM Hyperledger Fabric. And it's much easier to scale up. It can handle a lot of transactions. But mainly used in financial industry, like banks use Corda, blockchain platforms. And Ripple. Ripple is a new, and it's one of the most popular cryptocurrencies nowadays. So it's an open source protocol. So its major competitor again is IBM Hyperledger. Again, scaling up is much better than IBM Hyperledger. So that's Ripple. And now I'm talking about some use cases of blockchains. So how blockchain is normally used. Like for example, I gave this example earlier. Let's assume leasing on a blockchain platform without any middleman. So you can use leasing smart contract. So landlord creates a smart contract with the key attributes of tenancy, such as property details, location, and the rental amount, etc. Contract conditions. Then tenant is notified, and tenants can view the terms of the contract. See, all this can happen like a simple app. It doesn't look any different from a simple app. Tenant is notified and can review the terms of the contract, and which can be seen in a traditional legal format. And tenant, as long as they agree, they can digitally sign. Then the transaction is complete. In case the tenant is coming for the first time, they have to register. Now, once this is set, so landlord creates a smart contract and notifies it to the tenant. And again, tenant signs. Smart contract is notified to the landlord. Once these things are set, then I think all the fund distributions, everything happens by triggering the events in the smart contract code. Right. So, for example, the smart contract debits the tenant's account. So the smart contract can directly handle the tenant account every month. The funds are right away dispersed to the landlord. No middleman here, no commissions you're paying anyone. And in the case where there is an exceptional, sometimes tenants might be incurring some expenses. as long as they provide all the validation reports, like the bills and etc. So there is a process by which the smart contract can ensure that these expenses are deducted and the remaining amount is paid as the rent. Right. So that's how this is an architecture, and this is how you write a code. This is not a technical session. This is how you write a code in Solidity. This is how an app can be created in Ethereum. The same thing. So benefits of a smart contract in leasing agreements. Most of the leasing agreements happen in centralized servers, and these are unsecured databases. And given that landlords and tenants, they don't know each other, they're doing a trustless transaction. This needs some middleman, like a title agent, who should be paid to engage with both parties. Whereas in the case of a blockchain, it has got a lot of advantage because you don't need any broker, and it's much cheaper. So less transactions cost. So I'll leave that again. Blockchain architecture is not needed. A simple example, a similar example you can use for supply chain management. So because in supply chain management, there are so many parties involved. Let's assume someone is exporting bananas from India to say Dubai. In banana export, you have so many layers of middlemen. So not middlemen, but not only middlemen, but many players in the whole ecosystem or the supply chain. You have a farmer, you have a fertilizer company, you have a seeds company, and the farmer will produce and supply that to the exporter. The exporter there is a logistic company, there is a warehouse. There could be a customs department, a bank, an insurance company, customs department from Dubai, and a warehouse right from Dubai, and an importer in Dubai. So a supermarket in Dubai and a consumer in Dubai. So you have so many people in the supply chain. And so in each place, there might be a lot of complexities in terms of how information is shared between all these parties. Whereas if you use a blockchain, all these parties will maintain the same ledger. So whatever information is shared, everyone knows in the system. So compliances, everything becomes seamless on the blockchain platform. For example, the importer might face a lot of liabilities and issues. Let's assume the farmer guarantees that the produce is organic. But how can they validate it is organic? How can they provide the whole complete traceability that it is organic? And this is possible if there is a blockchain. Like, for example, recently, the Covaxin vaccines made by Bharat Biotech got rejected by Brazil government. 2 million doses got rejected. One of the reasons why they got rejected is there were a lot of compliance issues. Had they used blockchain, they won't have any compliance issues. I think rejecting by the Brazilian government would have been almost impossible in that case. Audit compliances too. I think audit process can be much more simplified because of the advantage of transparency in blockchain. Letter of credits, again, it's connected to, say, export mechanism. Frauds in LOCs can be minimized. Like, for example, in India, all the big banks formed a consortium blockchain whereby LOCs fraud can be minimized. Because a lot of times what happens, if you remember the case of, who is this, Nirav Parekh, so who defrauded many banks in India. So one of the routes they use for defrauding is using the same LOC and discounting it with many banks by not informing the other bank. So this kind of issues can be solved if information is shared across banks and a consortium, right? So that's another use case of blockchain. There are many use cases in the world where I think blockchain has been used, right? So let me check the time. I think it's Dhananjay, is it time to close now, or I'm happy to take questions?
Yes, sir.
There are many other use cases, and I think cryptocurrencies on blockchains using blockchain technology is also an interesting area to look at. So most of the cryptocurrencies are floated through something called as an ICO, initial coin offerings. All the ICOs are fundings are raised to develop some technology or a utility tokens, which are traded in exchanges as cryptocurrencies. Apart from ICOs, we also have something called as non-fungible tokens, which have become quite popular recently. Like, for example, Salman Khan, the Indian actor, came out with his own merchandise as a non-fungible tokens, where people can purchase using unique digital currency created by that platform. So these are some advancements that are happening. I'm happy to take any questions. I stop it here. Please feel free to ask any questions.
Sir, what do you think? What is the future of blockchain in India in particular?
Well, I think I see a huge future in India for blockchain, because there are some obvious advantages of using a blockchain, especially if you're transacting with many people where trust is a problem or access is a problem.
Professor, I have just in the interest of time, I will just ask one question, sir.
Yes, yeah.
Can you throw some light on this Bitcoin ETFs? Some ETFs are being.
Yeah, see, I think just like any ETF, if you assume that Bitcoin is one of the asset class, right? So you can create, and there are cryptocurrency exchanges. Well, you can create a product like an ETF, similar to ETFs floated in stock exchanges. You can create ETFs on digital currencies too. It doesn't have to be just Bitcoin. It could be a combination of many currencies as a mutual fund, for example.
Yeah. I only have idea that because to reduce the trust deficit, we have launched this Bitcoin.
Right.
Similarly, Bitcoin ETFs may reduce the trust involved in Bitcoin, may increase the trust.
Well, yeah, possible. I think you're right. Yeah, but I think, Dhananjay, I think in my own view, we have taken the speculation on currencies much more serious than the utility of the currencies.
True. Very true.
So I think that's the problem.
Yeah. We request some more interaction from the participants.
Yeah. Please.
Sir, I have one doubt, sir.
Yeah. Gautam.
Sir, now we're using the cryptocurrency, and the cryptocurrency means how the uneducated people should be used, sir. The educated people.
No one should use cryptocurrencies for trading purposes, strictly speaking, unless you are highly into that. For example, people who know the utility of the product behind the cryptocurrencies should use the cryptocurrencies. And that's how they have been built. For example, if you want to purchase a cryptocurrency, you should know what is the technology behind the cryptocurrency. Like, for example, I'm purchasing Ripple or Corda. I should know exactly what is the use of Corda. And would Corda really helps in my business? Then I have to purchase Corda and I can use it in the ecosystem. Now, if I am using Corda because Corda price might go up in the next 5 days or 2 days, I think that's not a right way to look at it. So cryptocurrencies should be strictly prohibited for speculative trading purposes. So common man should not really invest in cryptocurrencies.
Okay, thank you, sir.
See, if you look at ICOs that have come out in the US, there have been more than 5,000 cryptocurrencies that have been issued, out of which 99 or more than 99% of them have failed. I'll just show you the statistics. Give me 1 minute. I'll share another screen, which I normally use for my ICOs. Can you see my screen? The new screen now?
Yes, sir.
See, look at this.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, if you look at the cryptocurrencies that have been issued, the whole cryptocurrencies that came out of the market, 81% of them are scams. 6% failed and 5% gone dead. Only the remaining portion of the cryptocurrencies, that is less than 10%, have moved on trading platforms. And out of which only 1.6% are promising and 3.8% are successful and 2.8 are questionable. So in other words, out of the whole 5,000 or plus cryptocurrencies, only 3.8% of them are successful.
And what do you think the reason is, sir?
Because I think a lot of people are trying to raise funds through currency issuance because it's like, you know the dot-com bubble that happened in the late 90s. So they're trying to cash in the hype.
Okay.
They don't have a serious technology idea behind issuing the currency.
Thank you.
Any other queries by participants? Otherwise, let me have a vote of thanks to Professor Vijay Bhaskar sir. Sir, this is a amazing session. We have really benefited, and you have thrown light on that, because personally I can share my personal experience. It has been very Greek and Latin to me when people use all these terminologies, and it is as people say, it requires a lot of effort to make a difficult thing simple, and it is very easy to make a simple thing difficult. You have made such a big, you have thrown light in our understanding of these otherwise complicated concepts. We are able to. This is only a bit of knowledge you have given. We will go further, and it is always a pleasure to listen to you, sir. Which is it's like a dil mange more sort of thing. It is you, and with a lot of and I am on a personal note, I am very jealous of your stay in Netherlands and how you explore things, sir. And I thank very much on behalf of all the participants from all over India. In fact, professors, deans of various computer science departments, being a cross-disciplinary and interesting topic. We have from CSE, from MBA, from commerce, economics, from various universities all over AP, Telangana, and people have participated and benefited from your simplification of such a topical concept. And
My pleasure.
I leave the last word to you, sir. I request you to comment.
Well, yeah, my pleasure. I'm glad that I'm able to share with so many people, and I think so. I look forward to engage more for much more focused audience on specific topics in blockchain or cryptocurrencies in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks.